Hello, and I guess this is just kind of like I wouldn't say a full-on vent, less, I guess it's less venty and more me just explaining, uh, how I currently feel. Pretty much it is about me being laid off from my job. I worked at a sub place, not Subway, it's another chain place that I will not need the mention of because of I'm still wanting to use them as a reference, and they're 100% willing to be references for me, especially for the manager there. So, yeah. Basically, I got laid off beginning of the year. I got laid off on I want to say, uh, 2 days ago. Yeah, that pretty much would be the beginning of the year. So right at the beginning of the year, got laid off. They made it abundantly clear that was being laid off, not fired. And the main reason why was because business was not doing so well, but primarily more because of I wasn't keeping up. And a lot of that of me keeping up, as they told me, were I just wasn't keeping track with pacing and I wasn't putting the effort. But when it comes to the actual reasons why I truly believe why I was laid off, wasn't because of effort. It was most certainly because of pacing. But rather, I was a back of the house person. I worked in the back, not really with a lot of people, so a lot of my effort was invisible. And because of that, and not me realizing that, I was also not communicative. I was inherently kind of the isolated person, which is why I wanted the jobs to be generally more isolated. Because I am autistic, I am socially inept in a lot of ways, and because of that, that ultimately spelled my demise in the job. I left on pretty mutual grounds. Like, I pretty much agreed, yeah, I wasn't being my best. I could have been better. But when I was first laid off, 2 days ago, I first thought it was more 50-50, because I thought they could have been better communicating with me, having a better flow of process overall. But as I thought about it more and more, it's more 25% theirs, 75% me. And a lot of that has to do with communication. A little bit of history with my position there is that when I was first hired back in February of last year, so I worked, like, again, 10 to 11 months, I was a very early bloomer. I was one of the fastest improving employees, and I was told that. But that's because I asked a million questions, I was constantly out of my comfort zone, talking and just communicating with my troubles, what I need to learn, and various things like that. Especially compared to the string of bad hires that we had at the time, I was pretty much at the start of that, and I managed to be one of the very few people who were from that string of hires that stayed around for a while, where I was just considered like one of the better back of the house people. I racked bread some of the fastest. I was as fast as my sister, who also worked there, when it came to washing dishes. She was the only one who was actually faster than me. So I wasn't a bad employee, but because of that, I set the bar high at the start, which I didn't mind because I was getting to the point where I was comfortable. It was to the point where I was comfortable with what I'm doing. As long as I kept doing it, that I can leave the work satisfied and not necessarily drained every day. Unlike the prior two jobs I had, which were incredibly short amount of times. My first job, 2.5 weeks. My second job, which was a seasonal position, was only a month because it was seasonal. It was at Amazon warehouse, and that's a story. But I peaked out really early. So because I peaked out really early, and after a string of bad hires, I was able to kind of obtain a sense of expectation for myself, and I managed to keep that for the first handful of months. But as you know, with any chain business, there's a corporate side of things that the stores themselves don't have much control over, because they need to do certain things that are regulated for health code, or because the corporate chain requires it in order to have their branding and access to their types of supplies and stuff, like with foods or certain ingredients and such. So processes changed. How we racked bread went entirely from just baking sheets to molds. That was a mess. And a lot of the process of these things change. I don't mind a day-to-day changing work schedule. I don't mind my schedule being weird and random. I don't mind having to come in on inconsistent days. I don't mind working several days or coming in on days I thought I had off. I don't mind that. And in fact, it keeps me from being bored from the job. But when the process kept changing in weird ways that I didn't really understand at first, a lot of it just kind of came off as me just really slowing down, and since I was in the back, not talking much, there weren't many people who I talked to, aside from, oh, what do you need? Do you need this? Oh, you want me to do this? Sure, I'll do that right now. Because I was back in the house. So, and plus the fact that my philosophy on working on things is to get it done right first, then get better. Because if you can't do it right in the first place, you're just going to be wasting more time redoing it, and you're overall going to be spending more time. And because I already had this sense of expectation placed within me that I was one of the better back of the house people, so thus I felt like I shouldn't be asking questions, that I will be considered unprofessional. I won't be someone who they want to keep around, because again, it was after a bad string of bad hires, and I came out at the beginning of that. I didn't want them to think I was being a nuisance. I hate being a nuisance. Like, as someone who's autistic, that's like some of the worst things I could ever feel to other people, is feeling like I'm just in the way. And that's the one thing that I probably need the most in a job, is to not feel in the way. That's why I want to improve and become an early bloomer, so I'm at least in the way as possible. But because of that, I wasn't allowing myself to get help when I needed. And because of this, it just seemed like I was either becoming lazy, slow, complacent, and just overall a bad worker. Like I said, I was laid off, not fired, and a lot of the managers and such who I did talk to, and the people who are just kind of like in leading roles, didn't understand that for the most part, but I still wasn't keeping up. That was the bottom line. Especially the main manager there was especially nice to me, especially about laying me off. Like I was the one who said, so I'm being laid off, and he was like, yeah, but he didn't want to say it because he really liked me having me there. And I explained to my reasons, like, very similar, not as in detail reasons I am now, since it was just a quick little meeting letting me know about that. And to also let me know that on pretty much tomorrow, or what would be now, there's a storm coming where I am, and if you live in New England, that means snow around this time of year. So technically, I don't even have a last day. So yeah, I have to come in on Friday, bring back my uniform, and pick up my last check, or second last check. It depends. Retail, delayed check scheduling and all that. It's weird, but pretty much it was a pretty mutual thing in the end. And ultimately, even though I do believe how they handled things wasn't the best, it was ultimately my fault, because when I did explain things, when I was able to communicate with them, they did help change. Like when my schedule was first cut and I wasn't allowed to stay after closing, and I couldn't just adjust to everything right away, because a lot of the actual scheduling was quite unfair in my way. But because my efforts were invisible, they didn't know that right off. But when I finally did explain it to them, they helped adjust it. They helped make things more efficient, which thus put me back on track. But that was only after 2 to 3 weeks of this being a consistent issue that I was overall more hurtful than helpful. So it was more of a begrudgingly kind of help, and that was my fault. I didn't think of that right at that point, but especially looking back on it, I should have said something earlier. I should have said something faster. But I was just not allowing myself to have that. I wasn't allowing myself to accept that even though I have expectations of myself and that I was an early bloomer, I should still ask for help. I didn't communicate with my team. I wasn't talking to them. And because of that, my issues were just completely silenced, and I had nobody to fault but myself. I was my own muzzle, if you will. Like, no one put that muzzle on me but myself. So even though, like I said, they could have handled things better, I couldn't handle, like, if I did my part how I was supposed to, and, was more communicative, not being a lonely, isolated person like I always am, if I was just more out there and just more willing to talk to people, not in a snooty, constantly criticizing everything sense, which I might came off once or twice as, but more in the, I know how to talk to people and explain to them how to make things more efficient and how to work with them better, I probably would still have my job now and probably be considered at least a decent employee. I don't think I would be ever considered a fantastic employee. Yeah, I'm one of the fastest dishwashers and bread rackers, but everything else I was just kind of average at. And since I improved so early on and was an early bloomer, it just made me seem like one of the better back house people right off the bat. So, but either way, I would still have my job. So, me being laid off is ultimately my fault. I might not be they might not be blameless, but it's still ultimately my fault, and it's something that I'm using and learning from, is to ultimately be more communicating, be more forward with myself, and just be more honest with myself. I don't cut myself a lot of slack. I'm very critical of myself. It's very hard for me to say I'm okay with myself. I hate myself quite a bit. But I gotta learn to accept myself more, is probably what I'm settling for right now. So, yeah. And I just kind of wanted to record this right now so that I can get it out there. If any future employer ever comes across this video, I was laid off, I'm willing to learn, because that's the best thing you can do from this kind of situation. Take it in stride and learn from it. And those are the main things that I learned. Be more communicative, be more accepting yourself, and more forward with the issues that you have with something. Don't be a jerk about it. Don't be entitled. I don't think I ever sounded too entitled there, but it was definitely why didn't you say this earlier sort of thing, which was my consistent issue. Because whenever I did explain something that I had troubles with, it was already too late. It was already a couple weeks in, potentially even a month in to that issue, and I just wasn't communicating enough. So, for younger people out there, or people who are struggling to keep jobs or find hiring, learn from your prior positions. Because before I worked at that place, I only had that 1 month and 2.5 weeks at a job. But since I was willing to learn from them, accept things about myself, and look for jobs within my restrictions, I was able to still make myself appealing enough to be hired. And even if it was just during the rush time that that business had, or that location had at that time of year, I was still acceptable enough despite leaving my first ever job 2.5 weeks in, and only ever had a seasonal position after that. I had a lot of volunteer experience, but overall, it wasn't that appealing if you just looked at my track record. But the fact that I was willing to learn and explain to them why I felt certain ways and why things went the way they are and what I'm willing to do to change it means so much. Even if, you don't have good grades in school, just say what I've learned from there, what you're willing to do, and how you matured from it. Mistakes aren't permanent blemishes on your entire record. Learn to work around them and learn to learn from them. I guess, as redundant as to say, learn to learn. So, yeah. I guess this is kind of like just my video of me just also giving some advice too. Yeah. So, like I said in my previous video, I'm going to be working on commission info. I want to start being commissioned. I'm going to try putting myself out there. I'm going to be working on my stories more and uploading at least daily. Even if it's just 5 seconds of me just saying, oh hey, this is all I have. I just kind of wasted today. I want to get in the habit of making more videos and trying to make my online career. It might not be on YouTube. It might not be necessarily in storytelling for manga, which is what I want to do. It might be, heck, maybe my old childhood dream of making a video game as an indie game. Who knows? And I'm going to be looking for another retail job or just a new job in general because, I want to be at least mature about things. Not necessarily adult. I got a lot opinions about being an adult. But I want to be mature. I want to be responsible, ultimately. But yeah, this video's gone long enough. So, yeah. I hope this helped you in some way. If you had troubles with your job, getting laid off and stuff like that, if you had trouble with accepting that you might not be good enough, just know that you can learn, you can improve, and you can find a job. Before I got this job I had for 10 months, like I said, I only worked at a grocery store for 2.5 weeks and only worked a seasonal job at Amazon warehouse, which wasn't the most glorifying or most best kind of resume to have. But again, just prove to yourself that you're willing to learn and put an effort out there. You can definitely see when people just don't care or do care about getting their job. Care. All I say is care. And be willing to learn. Now I'm just repeating myself. Bye!